Earlier we looked at the smacking law itself and established a consensus that the law is confusing. It wasn't that long ago that violence was seen very differently to the way it is today. Perhaps it's not surprising that smacking raised no alarms when children's entertainment looked like this. Smacking's been part of New Zealand culture for generations, and arguably it's been the most popular. I, like many, was given the occasional smack and I survived, but it's parents' subjective ideas about smacking that concerns Sue Bradford and the degree to how such discipline is administered.
Now, of course, the parent who says, well, I don't ever lightly punish my children, it's not going to do them any harm, from their point of view they can't understand that, but what they don't see is that there's a spectrum of assault on children ranging from very inconsequential assaults right through to very serious battering and even killing of children. Most of it is done in the name of teaching the child a lesson or child discipline, and that's what the paediatricians and doctors tell us. It's all done with that intention of disciplining the child, but one person's very, very light physical discipline is another parent's quite serious one, and it's all violence.
Judging from the people we spoke to, opinions on smacking seem to be generational. Those who smack tend to be older, and those who were smacked tend not to want to smack.
In your opinion, do you think smacking should be part of good parental correction?
I do, just in a very minor way.
I don't believe you have to smack your children to discipline them, no.
I don't smack my grandchildren because their parents don't, but I don't think it would hurt them to get a little whack on the bottom from my hand.
No, I don't think that's a good parenting tool to educate your children. You have to teach them in other ways.
I gave them a smack on the time, but there's a difference between just giving them a little smack and hurt them.
I just don't think it's necessary to smack a child, regardless so much happens because of it. The rest of us, I think it's a good idea, need to just find another way to make it work.
Because, if the children don't listen, you have to force them to listen to something, which you want, because they don't understand what is right and what is wrong. That's why they're children.
I know I needed smacking when I was little, but I know some of my friends didn't, so it just depends on the parents and temperament of the child and how the smacking is carried out, really.
Bob McCoskrie and Sue Bradford agree that child abuse is criminal and needs to be addressed, but McCoskrie doesn't believe that smacking should be in that category, and he's worried that it may even be making things worse.
People simply don't buy the notion that a smack is child abuse. So we want to deal with child abuse, but please don't target good parents who may use a smack for the purpose of correction. In the same way that we want to target boy racers, but don't take the keys off elderly because of the fact that cars can lead to boy racing. The same reason as we want to deal with alcohol abuse, but that doesn't mean that someone can't enjoy a glass of wine at dinner.
When the law gives you a defence that it's okay to hit your kid in any form, that leads to many people thinking it's okay to hit their kid brutally and often, which is the sort of violence we all oppose. But they don't see that the sort of violence they think is okay is still violence, and on that spectrum is still dangerous to all our children. And because we have such an entrenched culture of violence against kids in this country, if we went back to having a law which allowed that reasonable force defence, it would be a disaster.
Let me put it this way. If there was no smacking legislation on, do you think people would have looked at the Kahui case differently when it came up on TV? Or do you think people still would have been mortified by it? I think people still would have been mortified by it. I think it's good to be self-aware that this stuff happens in our community. But we're talking about... I just think it's sad that we have to persecute the good people to find out what the bad people are doing. We need to be focusing on what the bad people in society are doing. And it's a counterculture, it's right through culture, it's right through economic classes. There are major issues going on with abuse that the police are struggling with, and my goodness, what would $9 million do towards sorting that out?
Warren Brookbanks also has concerns about putting child abuse and smacking in the same category.
law is overused, and law is often used as an alternative to developing other means of dealing with antisocial behaviour. And I think that it's entirely appropriate that parents should be the people who are principally concerned with the discipline of their children, and should be given some measure of latitude in doing that.
Prime Minister John Key has said he will keep the law because he believes it is working, even though opinion polls have suggested 80% oppose it. Bob McCoskrie believes that's a bad move.
But John Key's not going to do anything about this law. I mean, what is that? What sort of message does that send you then, that he doesn't really care?
That's what John says. The Prime Minister has said that, and I think that if a strong message is sent through this referendum, he ignores it at his peril. And I think you've just got to remember, a year ago the government changed. And many Labor Party commentators, as well as general commentators, said that one of the reasons that Labor was biffed out was because they failed to listen to the people.
Although she agrees the law is confusing, Sue Bradford, like John Key, says she's happy for it to stand as it is.
I'm quite happy with the law as it stands now. I wouldn't want to revisit it. Because
even though it still contains that provision for violence in there?
Well, I supported that amendment. I'm fine with what's in there. It's just common sense. I just didn't think it was necessary.
Like me, you are probably no closer to understanding the smacking law. I mean, most lawyers and police see the grey areas, but they have done their best to illustrate to the public what they are looking for when prosecuting under the new Section 59. You just have to go to their website. According to the police, you will most likely be prosecuted if you use a weapon or smack your child around the head or kick the child, if there are repeated incidents of an inconsequential or unimportant nature, and any force must only be for the purposes of restraint or by way of example to ensure compliance. You can use force of a reasonable nature to prevent any harm to your child and others, and if you're still in doubt, find other ways of disciplining your children. I'm sure Parents Inc. can help.